to this webinar produced by the Erasmus Plus project COMPUP. In this webinar, we will cover some definitions to make sure we have all the same framework before jumping into Module 1, the assessment of key competencies. We will also introduce some skill assessment methods that trainers and educators can use when working with low-qualified adults. First of all, we will speak about the types of learning. So how do we acquire competencies? There are basically three types of learning: formal learning, informal learning, and non-formal learning. Formal learning is always organized, structured, and it has defined learning objectives. From the point of view of the learner, it has always an explicit objective of a knowledge, a skill, and a competence. Typical examples are the learning that takes place in the education system or training provided in the workplace. Informal learning is learning resulting from daily activities related to work, family, or leisure, which is not organized or structured in terms of objectives, time, or learning support. It may be unintentional from the learner's perspective. At the same time, non-formal learning is learning which takes place through planned activities in terms of learning objectives and learning time, where some form of learning support is present, but which is not part of the formal education and training system. For example, sport activities or volunteering. So now let's speak about the definition of knowledge, skills and competencies by the European Commission. According to the recommendation of the European Parliament and of the Council of the 23rd of April 2008 on the establishment of the European Qualifications Framework for Lifelong Learning, knowledge means the outcome of the assimilation of information through learning. Knowledge is the body of facts, principles, theories and practices that is related to a field of work or study. The same document defines skills as the ability to apply knowledge and to use know-how to complete tasks and solve problems. In the context of the European Qualifications Framework, skills are described as cognitive or practical. And the same document defines competencies as the proven ability to use knowledge, skills, and personal, social, and/or methodological abilities in work or study situations and in professional and personal development. So now let's speak about the key competencies, which are the core topic of our project and of our module. The three key competencies we will speak about is literacy, numeracy, and digital skills. What does literacy mean? It refers to the ability to read and write, though some organizations see literacy in broader terms. There is a functional aspect to literacy, which sets it aside from related subjects, such as English. Definitions of functional literacy focus on the levels of competence in reading and writing which a person might need to fully cope with adult life. Being literate means that people are more able to access goods and services, are less reliant on others for support, and are better equipped to lead full adult lives. But what does numeracy mean? It refers to the ability to use mathematics in everyday life. Being functionally numerate includes being able to demonstrate a range of competencies which have a relationship to mathematics. For example, interpreting plans, maps, charts and diagrams, processing information accurately, solving problems and puzzles, checking answers, understanding and explaining situations, decision-making based on logical thinking and reasoning. So, to summarize, being numerate means more independence and confidence to use numbers and straightforward calculations in everyday life. And last but not least, what does digital skills mean? Digital competency is the set of knowledge and skills that are required when using ICT and digital media to perform tasks, to solve problems, and to communicate for work, leisure, learning, and socializing. Digital literacy may be defined as the capabilities which fit someone for living, learning, and working in a digital society. So now let's speak about our core topic of Module 1, competence assessment. So how can we assess a person's competence? Basically, the most commonly used competence assessment methods are rating forms, questionnaires, written or computer-based texts, oral examinations, direct observation, interviews, simulation exercises, performance audits, biographical approach, skill audits, structured interview, and facilitated reflection. Now let's see a little bit in details these competence assessment methods. So direct observation. What is direct observation? It is observing the learner at his or her work or environment. The natural work or environment makes the learners much relaxed and they display their competencies at ease without the usual anxiety that accompanies assessment. This makes the job of the observers easy, as well as they get concrete and relevant examples of behaviors to be assessed simultaneously as they can see them in action. Structured interviews. Structured interviews are another popular method, which are open-ended questions asked to a learner which help explore a particular competence better. It happens by asking very specific questions regarding a past performance, cited as example for a competency by the candidate, and the observer tries to establish the competency by asking questions about it. Let's see an example of structured interview. The observer might ask, "Can you tell me an incident or an example from your work life where you displayed the competency engaging and inspiring others?" The candidate might answer, "Yes, last year when I was posted in the XYZ mines in South India, we were running a green initiative on behalf of the organization where we planted around 1,000 saplings in the forest area around the mines." So now the observer might ask the following questions. Who had suggested the idea? At what level were you involved? Did you face any problems? How did you manage them? What do you think was the response of your team to this initiative? Did anyone oppose this? How did you create a buy-in for this project? Etc. The list of questions can be long, but the observer has to essentially bring out the fact that if a competency or behavior is displayed, there is a well-defined intent behind it as well. Simulation exercises. Simulation exercises are another competence assessment method. As these exercises represent situations from the work life or the daily life of the learner, they can easily relate to it and therefore relevant competencies are exhibited. Some of the important tools used under simulation exercises are role plays. Using role play in simulation exercises reveal a great deal of information regarding the behaviors. The role play may have a little situation described which is given to the learner, and similar information is provided to the observer. However, the observers are provided with certain leading questions which help to elicit the behaviors to be observed. Another competence assessment method is skill audits. Within the European Union, there are various standards and frameworks considering skill audits. In some countries, this is regulated by the government, but in most member states, there is no universal one-size-fits-all approach. Skill audits can either be subject-oriented, so putting the participant at the center of the process and support the process of self-reflection and self-assessment, or object-oriented, which focuses more on testing an individual aptitude. A combination of both is probably most successful, especially if you wish to guarantee the engagement of the participant. Though, when dealing with assessing skills for a particular sector or even particular job, extensive and comprehensive analysis of general potentials is not necessary. A more specific matching and testing of specific skills and experience to that sector is more useful and relevant. So the 3 stages of skill audits are the following. The first step is skill audit, assessment and validation. The second step is developing a competency profile and cross-referencing it to fields of activity. And the third one is matching the competency profile with requirements and demands of the labor market. Last but not least, another competence assessment method is facilitated reflection. Reflection is linked in some ways to skill audits, and some form of skill audits use elements of reflection. At its most basic, it helps learners reflect on their experience in order to discover and express what these experiences have taught them. It helps people to see that knowledge and skills can be gained through a variety of ways, including family life, work, paid or unpaid, community, voluntary or leisure activities, key experiences and events in life. There is no restriction on the type of experience that can provide someone with knowledge and skills. Even negative experiences might have led someone to learn something about them. It reveals the learner's potential and capacity to learn from future experiences. Recognition through reflection may allow individuals to go on to do more study or training if they choose. It may also help someone to plan their career or personal development. Reflection can be used where learners can demonstrate that through their experience they have already gained the relevant knowledge and skills required for a particular course of study or for a particular job. It helps learners to increase their self-esteem by recognizing their achievements. Reflection needs to be facilitated, however, as learners are likely to be more effective in recognizing their prior skills and experience learning if they are given support to identify how their previous learning links with the requirement for that job role. It is recommended that organizations implementing reflection identify appropriate facilitators. How is the process of facilitated reflection? In order to provide their evidence, learners will have to demonstrate orally and/or through written work that they have gained skills and knowledge through their experiences. This involves reflecting on those experiences, drawing out from them what has been learned, then writing this down or talking about it with the facilitator. The writing and the discussion with the facilitator will help to provide the evidence needed. Evidence can be gathered in a number of ways, and learners should be provided with guidance on the method to be used. Learners must be supported in the gathering or production of this evidence. Although not an exhaustive list, the following examples are a range of approaches that could be adopted: reflective accounts, diaries, and logbooks, professional discussion or oral assessment, observation of practice or simulation, benchmarking, profiling, record of volunteer learning and experience portfolio, and structured interviews. How do we reflect? One way to reflect is to simply think about things from the start of an event to the completion of that event. Another way to reflect is to ask ourselves questions about things, for example, to think about a work, community or social role that we play or that we have played in the past. This is a particularly useful practice when we reflect for the purposes of validating or recognizing past experience for entry to the labor market. So questions that we might ask: what did I do in that role? What were my main responsibilities and tasks? How easy or difficult did I find that role? What were some of the challenges I faced undertaking that role? What have I learned from undertaking that role? Another way to reflect is to think about some important events in our lives. For example, an important event you experience of school or college or university or work or a voluntary activity. Another might be an unhappy event such as being unemployed. All these things count as events in our lives. We also need to be able to identify the skills and knowledge that we used and the evidence for it or learned during that event. So this was basically our webinar. Thank you for having participated. So to sum up, in this presentation we have covered the definitions and differences between formal, non-formal and informal learning, the differences between knowledge, skills and competencies, describing what literacy, numeracy and digital competencies mean. And we have also presented a couple of methods that you can use to assess low qualified adults.